I'd love to introduce my co-hosts on the webinar here, Mr. Adam Dorrell. He is the CEO and co-founder of CustomerGauge. And Ben Phillips, he is a CX influencer and expert that are joining us on the webinar today. Welcome, Adam and Ben.
Good to see you, Ian.
Hello.
Thanks for having us today. Well, Ian, thanks so much. Hi, and welcome everybody to the topic today. We've called the outer loop crisis. I'm here with my friend and longtime collaborator in CX. Definitely consider him an expert, Ben Phillips. How are you doing today, Ben?
I'm all right, and good to be on with you again. I really enjoy our session, so thank you for getting me along to this one.
Well, I'm really pleased that Ben, when we started thinking about some topics this year, you and I were brainstorming stuff, and I think we really came across this thing about, where are we doing with outer loop? Huh? I mean, it's like, because I'm guessing when we all started in this business, the outer loop was the only thing out there, wasn't it? You had some bits and pieces of research that would come in and then do it. I mean, maybe you can just also introduce a little bit about your background, where how you got into CX.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working in CX 2 decades now. If I say 2 decades, it makes me feel very old. I have more grey hair than I did when I started, put it that way. And I've worked for a number of different companies, both client side, agency side, service side, Santander and Fujitsu, agency side, Nielsen and Ipsos. But all that experience has taught me, and I've really had to cut my teeth on this in the past few years, that when we manage B2B customer experience, we must think not only about how we improve the experience of the customer, but how then to protect those relationships, which obviously drives a huge amount of revenue per customer over the years. We have to go back into the organization to fix those outer loops. So I've got very close to this in my experience in CX over time.
That's great. That really sets us up. And I've got a little bit of an agenda slide here. So this is, some of the topics that we said. So we're going to try and really dive into the CFO angle, where to get the revenue from. And we're going to tackle what's the difference between inner and outer loop. I love this no BS framework. I'm kind of interested to see where we're going to go with that one. And for me, connecting the output to financial outcomes, that's really important to me. And then finally, you've got, and I love this build you've got, this little scorecard you've got of things to do this quarter. Hey, it's first day of the new quarter, so it seems appropriate. Does that sound good? Is that like kind of a nice program to cover here?
Pretty good to me.
Brilliant. Okay, now we saw this actually come back from, it was one of our customers. When Ian put it up there, we're like, oh yeah, I hear this a lot. I'm just going to read it out here and then let's have a little bit of comment on this. So we're collecting a mountain of feedback, but when the chief financial officer goes what it's worth, we don't have a clean answer. So have you seen this in your career?
Yeah, of course, because I think there are numerous issues and problems which confront every CX professional, but one of them, maybe at the top of the list, must be how to link experience management, as we might call it, not just customer experience, XM, we often see those acronyms. How do we link that to the financial performance of the business, either directly or indirectly? So if you're a CX manager dialing into this call today, CX professional, if you're not having a conversation with a chief financial officer or somebody very senior in the organization responsible for the financial performance of the business, then get ready for that. You absolutely should. It's one of the key things about demonstrating the value of CX over time.
Yeah, I really agree. And, it's one thing to do it in B2C where you can sort of like aggregate the customers together or at least make some big assumptions. But in B2B, if you're not taking strong signals from your biggest customers, that's really something to worry about, isn't it? I think the financial aspect has been underlit in our domain for some time.
I think so. Yeah, I agree with you.
So, we often talk about the closing the loop, but there is a distinction, isn't there, between what we call the inner loop and the outer loop. So I'd like to sort of dive in a little bit about this. Do you want to kick off on this one and talk a little about how you see the inner loop versus the outer loop, Ben?
I do, and in confusing land, we like to confuse ourselves, don't we? It almost sounds like when we say inner and outer loop, when we talk about inner, that means we must be doing something inside the company, right? And if an outer, we must be doing something outside the company. Just flip your brains for just a minute. When we refer to inner loop, we are talking about addressing the challenges, the feedback, and some of the issues which customers have surfaced to us, typically via feedback or market research. So we might say that if we close inner loops, which is the parlance, then we are saving our customers one at a time. We're fixing individual immediate issues. Flip that now to, well, that can't exist in isolation, can it? What happens if those issues keep recurring? What happens if there's something systemic inside the business which is causing the customers to experience that pain? Then we must by default consider outer loop management too. These are not mutually exclusive. They cannot be, although in many companies we see sometimes that it is. When we say outer loop management, we're referring to those big systemic problems which are leading to what the customer sees and what they experience.
Yeah.
And if we don't address them, if we don't invest in them and we don't fix them, they'll never go away. And I did a little bit of historical reading on this, by the way, to make sure my definitions were accurate. And so I got out my hardback, look, original, not first day, but maybe this is worth a few quid now on eBay. My original copy of the Ultimate Question 2.0, where if we refer to page 75, there's a whole chapter on closing the loop with customers. And the reason that exists in this, guys, is because the authors, Fred Reichard and Rob Mark, realized you cannot have a score if you don't close loops in two ways. And the two ways are these shown on the screen here today: serving the customer and fixing the systemic issues within the company. So it's been there for some time for us to consume within our strategies.
I like what you were saying about fixing the customer issue. And
Yeah.
then outer loop is fixing the company. And I
Right.
think it's a really good distinction. If
Yeah.
I think about this, because I've also been doing this for 20 years, the outer loop was where everything started. You know, you'd get
Yeah.
customer feedback, and then you'd have these big projects to work on, often without any new information until the following year or whatever, until you fixed it. And there wasn't much of an inner loop because most surveys were anonymous or hard to get back to, or there wasn't the culture to do it. And
Yeah.
I have seen over the last 10 years a real improvement in people's inner loop work. There's a culture
Yeah.
of getting back to the customer, which I
Yeah.
really like. There's really nothing wrong with that. But I think as part of that, maybe people forgot a little bit about the importance of the outer loop and the strategic part.
I
It's
think
quite
so
good to
too.
foreground this as a crisis today, to say, if you're not doing that, you've not got everything part of it. Is that fair enough
Yeah.
to say?
Well, yes, because I think it's the yin and the yang, isn't it, of your customer experience management strategy. You cannot have one without the other. I guess you could, but what will happen over time is you will probably see, as all of the market analysts tell us, stagnation in your customer experience tracking metric over time. You won't necessarily see overall improvement. And I guess, we can leverage things like theories of marginal gains around all of these types of things. Unless you chip away slowly at the big problems, then they'll just remain and they'll never go away. So yes, I agree entirely.
Just before we leave the slide, is it okay if I bring in a real life example? It's kind of fresh in my mind
Oh,
that I've been working
go for it. I think that'll help our listeners too. Yeah.
This was so this was with a B2B company that is one of our clients, and they're getting their feedback in, and sure enough, there's a lot of customer comments that come in, and they're detractors. So they're
Right.
acting as a great fast tracking organization. Within 48 hours, they're jumping on those to see, hey, we're really sorry about this. Can we do something with it? And sure enough, and they reported this yesterday, they're getting some really good responses from that. They've already started to convert some of these detractors into a promoter just by talking about it. So that's great. That's a really good example, I think, of an inner loop issue. And it could be on
Yeah.
any item. But
Yeah.
what they've also been able to do is identify some key outer loop stories that come out of this, which are, well, one is to do with they need to fix manufacturing faults in their business. So the clients
Yeah.
are saying that there are issues around delivery or product quality, and that's going to require a lot of capital changes to do. But a classic example of an outer loop. But on top of that, the clients were saying, you're not communicating to us when things are slipping. You're just not being proactive. And I think that's a slightly different thing, where you're saying, okay, this is something that can be fixed. This is because it's a communication and a culture issue. We don't have to buy machinery to do this, but we can train. So I think those are two examples of the outer loop. And one is going to be very difficult to fix. I have to do it long term. But the other thing about communication seems to be something that could be fixed in 1 or 2 quarters, I think. How does that chime with you, Ben?
Yeah.
Is that sort of
right. And you said 2 key words in there as well, didn't you? Communication and culture, right? And much of the time, Actually, there may be some really good outer loop work ongoing within the organization, but unless our colleagues know that, and unless they can see that there's actually a roadmap to addressing some of these challenges that the customer experiences, then there'll be a lack of awareness of the effectiveness of those changes over time. So
Yeah.
again, I think this is so important for us to understand the nuances of it. Adam, I
Let's
don't know
go.
if you've seen some of the comments, sorry, in the chat, but your mic's a little quiet. I think folks are struggling to hear you. I don't know if there's a way of dialing that up.
I'll do my
Mm.
best. Is that if I'm
Oh,
very
that's
close to
better.
it? Is that better? Oh, I'm really
That's
close
better.
to it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay.
I hope that helps our listeners.
No, there's no problem at all. But let's. So we've tried to illustrate this graphically. Ben, talk us through this image that
Oh,
we've
yeah.
got here.
So I love this. All right. Don't we always focus on the sexy stuff in life, right? So it's sexy to be a firefighter putting out blazing fires. I can think of a ton of movies where we see that happening. Would you necessarily perceive it as being so sexy if I said, well, it's also firefighting if you're in the business of fire prevention, for
Yeah.
example, all the security and protection measures that you see people using both domestically and commercially. Our guy very diligently putting up a smoke detector on the ceiling here. You might say, well, of course, that's not as sexy as the putting out blazing fires firefighter. Well, I think you can probably see where we're going with the analogy
Yeah.
here, right? A bit like inner and outer loop management, you cannot have one without the other. You cannot have the sexy, handsome firefighter putting out the fires unless you have fire prevention in the first place. And actually, if we go even deeper than that for just a minute, the fire on the left might not happen at all in the first place if you focus on the fire prevention on
Yeah.
the right hand side. So we must think of inner and outer loop in that way. Our customers won't experience the issues that they're having if actually we have gone into the business and we've used our business intelligence and our resources and our data to work out where the points of conflict and issue and friction really are, address those with investment and with resources and with some systemic way of tracking that improvement over time, and then we might not actually land up with the fire at all. If we don't do that, then all we'll end up doing is firefighting. So I think this analogy works really, really well for what we're trying to describe. Does that make sense to you as well, Adam, the way I've explained it?
It totally does. And for everyone on the call today, we're really focusing on fire prevention today. In fact, let's go into this because the next step about this is you can be held in a trap if you don't move into fire prevention mode, can't you? So let's just talk about the 3 steps around here, Ben. You've also lived this, I think, as part of your career.
Yes, I have. Yes. Yeah, and very recently, I mean, in Fujitsu, this was exactly what we looked at, right? So like many of our callers on the phone today, on the call today, you'll know that we don't always have sort of perpetual voice of the customer listing. Sometimes that might be an RNPS annual survey, for example. Well, in such cases, what happens? You get a batch of detractors coming in. If you're measuring net promoter, if it's not net promoter, you're tracking the CSAT, then all your low scores. Just think of it the same way. Well, of course, it's incumbent on us to respond to those folks who are responding with poor scores. Now, if we address them, that's fine. And we may result in the next part of the loop in blue, where actually those scores start to hold steady again and will improve things slightly. But then we'll end up just going back into the business and saying, okay, we did all right this year, but we're going to end up requesting the same CX management budget from you because we believe that things are just going to look the same. And then we just end up going around in this perpetual loop that repeats forever. There is no part of this loop, though, which defines or talks about going out into the business with an additional pot of investment to fix root cause issues. So as it says in our text on the left here, every board presentation is going to look the same, right? The same numbers will be surfacing. We'll just be reporting the same thing. And you know what? In reality, stakeholders get bored after a while if you're just rocking in. They want to know what's new. They want to know what's changing. What are we doing different? And if we're not doing anything different and nothing's changing, then CX becomes an underinvested discipline within the organization because of all of the above. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. And one of the things that you've always been really strong, a strong advocate of us is getting finance people into the loop as well. You have to have in your team finance people, Ben. And I wonder if you've got a view of this. I mean, how much revenue do you think you need to be covering with your feedback program to be meaningful?
This is really good, and we're going to reveal the number on the right-hand side of the screen in a minute. So, but I wonder if people on the call might have a little stab at this. What percentage of your revenue is giving you actionable feedback? We have a kind of best practice target around this, don't we, Adam? Where we
Yeah,
know that
yeah.
that spread, unless you get something like that, yeah, we're seeing some numbers coming in. 80%, says Esther. We got
Yeah.
any more? Any more of our guests wish to have a guess before we reveal the number? Maybe if not in the chat. 1.5%
1.5.
says Shauna and what a good spread. 1.5, 55 and 80. Adam, would you do the honors?
Sure. We've got to have at least 70%.
Exactly.
And I
Right.
like Esther's answer about 80. That's where I'd like to be. You should
Yeah.
be covering. No, but let's just drill down into this. So 80%
Yeah.
coverage of revenue. Is that 80% response, Ben?
No, well, no. What we mean by this is of your entire book, if you like, maybe that's a good way of describing it, or portfolio of business, the
Yeah.
entire value of the business that you have in the organization. What we're talking about here is the percentage of coverage of that.
Yeah.
And the reason is because we want to be completely representative when we then play customer experience results back into the organization. And we used exactly this model in Fujitsu. And when we first looked at it, we were less than this target number, a lot less
Yeah.
than this target number. But it got the leadership team and it got the account leaders, because in Fujitsu, right, every account was a big account. And so they're almost like micro businesses in and of themselves within a larger umbrella organization. Well, actually, we noticed that the coverage was a lot less than that.
Yeah.
So when we report our insights, we're not actually hearing from a really high level of revenue. We're hearing from one or two big accounts and then lots of small ones, but that doesn't fairly represent the spread that we would want to see. So I think this is a really important part of business analysis.
Yeah, I can give you some benchmark numbers as well. I mean, if you aim for
Mm.
80% of your revenue coverage, it's interesting because if you use Pareto, 80% of your revenue might be covered by just 20% of your customers. So that
Yeah.
you might be able to cover everything with 20% account response rate. But
Yeah.
normally we see something like 80% revenue, 50% or 60% of account coverage, and that might be between 30 and 40% in a really good company of contact response. Now,
Yeah.
the median for all of our clients at CustomerGauge is about 12% contact response. So that's a bit lower, but the companies that we work with that are really good are looking at 25, 30% response from contacts, and they're getting really close to this or in the zone. So it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if that's what you need to do, you need to be strongly aligned with the finance team. By the way, congratulations at Fujitsu that you were able to measure that. That's a really achievement.
Got close. Yeah.
Okay, with this, so this is some of the things that we've been putting together. So the no BS guide to having a killer outer loop program. So we'll try and break this down. Shall we? As a sort of like a way to go. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, so for this one, actually, if it's okay with you, just pulled up something from CustomerGauge, which is a classic way of looking at a particular outer loop theme. So you're looking at Net Promoter, you've got a summary in there, you've got drivers. Further down the page, you'd have comments to look at this stuff. I think of this as having an evidence-based look at a particular theme. And you probably want to have a few of these themes, somewhere, I don't know, 3 or 4 or something like that. How does that sound with you? Is this familiar to how you've done it in the past?
Yeah, very much. And do you know what? Any more than that? I think we have to be realistic today about who actually resources the effort towards resolving these things.
Yeah,
CX teams have been, in terms of personnel, reduced very much
yeah,
over the past decade or so. More is expected with less. If you operate within an organization which sees CX as a cost to the business, then that's even more challenging. So therefore, between 2 to 5 maybe key driver themes, areas of focus and prioritization that you come out with would be reasonable to expect a CX team to focus on. And by the way, this is outside any time spent on market research,
yeah,
because it's a little bit like that Pareto's law balance you talked about before. If we spend 80% of our time researching the market and only 20% of our time doing something about it, then maybe that's a balance that we would want to switch back the other way, right?
I think it's interesting. I mean, all the work I've done has pointed to there's normally a few areas in any business that give headaches, and they're pretty similar, I would say. It's in the service experience, how did you deliver something? It was in products or logistics,
Yeah.
communication, it could be billing. I mean, there's probably maybe pick any two or three from six or seven that are common to all businesses. So I think
Mm,
most businesses know where to start,
I think so too.
but
Yeah.
quantifying the impact of it, I think is really important. So if you're okay with this, let me go on to the next slide to think about how we
Yeah.
quantify it. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
again, Ben, you might differ on this, but there are three areas, aren't there, of
Mm,
you know things that are you can have lift on, or let's call it, or drag friction. Do you
mm.
just want to run through this with me?
Yeah. So I think if we think in terms of revenue, think retention, keeping customers, growth in the business, expanding those revenues, and retaining referrals and winning back customers too. I'm not going to read the text word for word, very
Yeah,
briefly. Keeping an eye on what is the dollar value of the accounts that we wish to retain, because
yeah,
actually with
yeah,
the outer loop work that we're doing, we're then going to keep hold of those individuals, and we want to keep those accounts obviously within our book. Some of those logos are very important to us and they're loyal to us and we want to work with them. But equally, by managing our outer loop activities, we could potentially expand the book of business that we have. And
yeah,
there's a relationship, as the slide tells us here, between measures like net promoter movement and expansion within those top
yeah,
segments. We saw a screenshot of CustomerGauge back there just then, and the dashboards in CustomerGauge are very, very good at being able to break out net promoter by revenue. You may equally have the same thing which with whatever CX platform you use in your own organizations too. I would hope you do. You should be able to look at your data analytics that way.
yeah. I
And then
agree.
last but not least, if we move an account from a detractor to a passive and then to a promoter in that stepped way over time, after meaningfully fixing things for them, that is the best way to gain trust. And we say trust is everything in business, right? That's the way we can turn around a customer relationship which is performing poorly, both in terms of sentiment, but also in terms of the revenue we're driving. I mean, I waved this book around at you earlier on. I think chapter one is about toxic profitability. And if anybody's read this or understands that, look it up, please. But it's all about you don't want to be making money from customers because we're charging them for things they don't want,
That's so
or
true.
we're making it
Yeah.
so difficult for them to leave they just can't and they're forced to renew. We want that referral and win back element to be because customers want to work with us. That's the key difference between all of this.
I agree. Actually, I'm going to raise you a book. I've got Fred's latest book
Oh,
here,
got that one
Leading by
too.
Purpose. Right? And actually, this is Fred's latest book is all about customer love or earned growth, which is this third column in referrals.
Yes.
And I think this is really important because actually, I would say as we go across the screen here, number one, everyone thinks about, oh my God, we've just lost an account. That is what makes people
Mm,
wake up to the cost of customer experience normally.
yeah.
A customer churned who hasn't come across that. Could we have
Mm,
prevented it? The
yeah.
second one, thinking about upsells to promoters, is already not even that well known, but I can give you a stat on that. So I know from one of our clients that their promoters are twice as likely to buy another product from them as anybody else. So that by
There you
focusing
go.
on promoters, the sales team could do it.
Yeah.
But almost no clients that I know, no companies out there are really good at measuring referral. But
Mm,
as a stat, I mean, a third of our business at CustomerGauge comes from referrals. We're good at measuring
yeah.
that, but
Yeah.
it's one of these things that really the payoff. These are the key things. You must focus on all of them, not just the one on the left. Is really important.
Yeah. And when we talk about balanced scorecards, wouldn't it be great to have these things represented in that balanced scorecard versus just very static, your usual crowd, your usual
Yeah,
suspects of
yeah,
metrics that you might represent normally?
yeah. Now we've got workbooks on this, but definitely you can go to a finance person and get them to do this with you if you're in CX. Now,
Mm,
so we know this from having the framework. This is the collaboration that you and I have done. I mean, there's these 5 actions that people can do. Let's just quickly run through these ones. Ben, number
yeah.
one, linking each theme to revenue. So how can you do that?
Mm. Well, we talked about uncovering a certain amount of themes earlier on. And again, I hope that your technology allows you to at least line up financial performance with customer experience performance. If you can't, then we've got guidance on ways to do that. Stack rank revenue, for example, how we organize our revenue by our net promoter or our CX metric, and then by response rates to identify what's really going on there and link the themes to those. That will help. We talked earlier on about that conversation with the CFO.
Yeah.
That will help get that conversation really up and running with the CFO to sponsor the activity that we want to drive. I think if on point two here, if we're not already well networked within our organizations around
Yeah,
stakeholders, it's to really start undertaking that kind of effort, ensure we always hear the phrase CX is everyone's job, which causes us hell's confusion. But actually, what we're really trying to say is everybody has a vested interest in customer experience. It might not be your job directly, but it should be a part of the consideration of what you do.
yeah,
Um, we built in Fujitsu a governance method and model of how to
nice.
manage customer experience through from survey to execution of change. If you don't have one, again, that's time and effort that I really think you should invest to just spell it out for people how important that is to
Ben,
really
how
track.
often did that run, that governance cadence?
For us, it was after every annual survey, but then we would check in at specific points along the journey to understand how those changes were being made. It was on a quarterly basis for
Yeah,
us. So the trigger point was the annual survey and then quarterly thereafter, account by account, by the way. So it wasn't just top level, country level, it was account by account. Step four here talks about closing the loop with customers directly. That is our inner loop
yep,
focus, and the outer loop closes when customers see the fix, right? So it's not just about tell a customer we're going to do something to help them. We have to do that outer loop work that goes with it. And then we talked about balanced scorecard on the last screen, but step five here is, scores on a scorecard can sometimes be not interrelated, exclusive. They don't make any sense. They're the typical kind of suspects that you might see. If you link everything to revenue performance, then stakeholders sit up. They will really take note of what's happening, the successes, the failures, and where the money really needs to be spent in order to show and expose revenue at risk, which I think is so important in our consideration here.
yeah. I followed all of this because I think this was really clear in my career. But you brought
Mhm.
something to the fore when we were discussing this that I had not really appreciated it. So I'm going to go to the next slide now. And it's
Yeah.
about the politics and the friction of
Yeah.
doing stuff. So let's just take the graph on the left here and I'll walk you through it. And then I'd like you to take me through the one on the right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think what you're talking about with the revenue, that's a kind of like where's the dollar impact
Yeah.
part of it, isn't it? It's like as you go towards the right on the graph on the left here,
Mhm.
you'll see, that's it's most important if we put it in a four-box matrix. And then as we go on the vertical axis, the customer impact, the more customers you can influence, obviously the better, right? So we've got
Yeah.
three closed loop projects here. Number one would be the one to go for first, wouldn't it? And then maybe number
Yeah.
two, because of the most customer impacts, but you could toss that up between one and three. Is that clear?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
talk me through the one on the right, because this is about how difficult it can be to get something through a company.
Yeah,
Talk,
and I'll
what is,
frame it.
yeah, what's that like?
I'll frame it. Look, let's be honest. We're all friends on this call here today. There are many hidden reasons why companies don't tackle the issues which the chart on the left tells us should be the most obvious to tackle. And they are things like, and I think this is what led to this slide in the first place, Adam, right? There can be elements of service, products, process steps that exist within the customer servicing model that's someone's baby in the company,
Yeah,
where the company might have spent a lot of hard cash already on implementing a thing. Is everything perfect in life? No, it ain't. What happens if that thing isn't as good and as big and as beautiful and as shiny as we thought? And actually, it's screwing up customer experience. Who's going to put their hand up and say, oh, that was me? We did that.
yeah, yeah,
No one. Therefore, some of the biggest challenges that we see might not be tackled as readily or as quickly as we might expect. That means we have to look at this through a completely different lens. Whilst our chart on the left in red tells us what's the natural priority order of tackling stuff,
yeah,
actually, in reality, if we take a difficulty of execution axis, what this is telling us is that we have to shift the priority order of all of those things. It might actually turn out that priority three, which was a low priority for us previously, becomes the one which we're probably going to be able to get the most needle movement on if we put that through the reality lens. And we realize as CX professionals, we're going to have to navigate a landmine field, maybe, of various challenges within the organization that are both political and unforeseen ahead of ever getting to trying to tackle these issues, but still equally has the same amount of dollar impact. I hope I'm making sense when I
Yeah,
when I
but I love this. What I love about this is that this is exactly how you, as a CX practitioner, can take this to the board, even.
yeah
Because if you're able to articulate this, you have an internal dilemma in the organization. You can say, look, this is definitely going to make financial sense on the left-hand
yeah
side,
yeah
but there's more pain about doing this. Maybe it's a new
yeah
IT system or it's a big
yeah
change to something on the right-hand side.
yeah
And there could be a view right now in the economic cycle, we're just going to do what's easy.
yeah exactly yeah
But there's a contra view to that, and you can say, well, if
yeah
it's going to be hard for us, it's probably hard for our competitors as well.
yeah
Maybe this is the thing that we should do that sets us aside. Now you
yes
can't have that. You can't have that decision. You can just bring the evidence.
yeah
But if you have all of this together, this I think can really change the game at a board level. So really nice build, Ben. Thanks for bringing that in.
yeah
All right,
yes
let's romp on through the rest of the presentation. Right, so you're at the board. Actually, that's a good selling. So you're at the board. What do you say? But you've been through this loop, Ben. How have you seen it?
what happens in a typical CX board meeting, right? Numbers get reported. Um, but I would like to think, and I do think this is the case, the majority of CX professionals out there in the marketplace, they've been through the mill on this a few times now, and they know that you can't just rock into a board meeting with NPS is up, NPS is down, X number of our customers think this, Y number of our customers think that. I mean, look at the quote in parentheses here. It talks about how our outer loop management program retained X amount of customers, all revenue,
Yeah,
contributed to Y dollars expansion, and generated Z in euros referred pipeline, right?
yeah,
So there's a way of holding a conversation with leadership team stakeholders that isn't just chart up, chart down, number left, number right, because it is all meaningless. This is not mythical to say that those things are largely meaningless at board level. It's
yeah,
it's an oddity that we continue to think that a CX report needs to contain NPS up or down. Actually, NPS, CSAT, they're incidental, they're lagging metrics. We know
I
that.
agree. I agree.
We would show their performance as a consequence of having done something. What the business wants to know is my investment in CX helping us to perform more viably financially? Are
Yeah,
we more profitable? Have we addressed our churn customers? Have we understood and identified our revenue at risk and now putting investment in there to fix those kinds of things? So, like it says on the screen here, we're focusing on accountability and linking to revenue, not on a better survey performance or improvement. We have to get better at doing this type of board level communication.
yeah, and I can tell you, I was invited to a board meeting from one of our clients yesterday to be a
Mm,
bit of an extra to give it a bit of extra solidity to their program. Really,
yeah.
they did a great job, but they were able to say, look, we were here a year ago when we measured it.
Yeah.
We're now here, and this is what's changed. And
Okay. Yeah.
but I can tell you just a quick tip. You know what was most powerful is when they
Yeah.
had a slide of customer comments.
Oh, yes. I love
So
those.
this is
Yeah.
a slide of about 12 to 15 customer comments from
Yeah.
before and then afterwards. Now, they might have been
Uh,
cherry picked a little bit, but on the other hand, they're so powerful. And the
yeah.
chairman and the other board, they literally got up out of their chairs, looked at the screen. So you can
Uh,
engage people with money, but it's also the
yeah.
voice of the customer as well. So it's a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
tip.
Yeah.
And then,
Great.
how would you build a revenue at risk view? This is a simplified way of doing it, Ben. How would you view something like this?
Yeah. Simplify. Oddly simplified. If you don't have your data connections right, then can be tricky for you to get to. But I would encourage everybody to pursue this type of view.
Yeah,
We're breaking revenue at risk down by banding of customer feedback result. And I'm trying to be sort of neutral here in case NPS isn't your thing. If it is, it's easy to show, just like this screen shows us, right? We get a
yeah,
percentage of detractors, we get a percentage of passes, and we get a percentage of promoters in our most recent survey response. Just like in CustomerGauge, we can align revenue to those bandings. Now, it becomes a really good access point to a conversation with the CFO. If we walk in and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CFO, $9.1 million of our revenue is at risk because of the detractor responses that we're getting from our feedback program. Can you help us invest in this area to improve those experiences? Because it can't come out of CX measurement budget. We're already maxed on our measurement budget.
Yeah.
We need a CX improvement budget. So you need to help us there, because there's $9.1 million of revenue at risk.
Yeah.
And that should be an unarguable business proposition to be able to go in with something like that.
Yeah, I agree. There's one thing missing from this slide, and that
Go ahead.
is non-responders. And so, going back to where we were before, is that how much of your revenue is covered? Fred Reichert told me once, he said, if you've got a non-responder, you should think of them as a detractor.
Yeah,
and that can dramatically change the metrics here. Worth thinking about, right?
What's the reason they're not replying? Is it because something's wrong, or they're so pissed off they don't want to? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's harsh to think of them, but it's worth at least having that in your mind. That's why you need to cover as much revenue. All right, let's bring it home here. What are you going to do this quarter? Now, today is the start of a new, fresh quarter. It's a spring-like day. Let's walk through what everybody on the call can do just before we take questions. So, Ben, step one, getting to revenue.
Yeah, so we talked about this, right? So I think it generated interest in the chat already. Try to work out what your revenue coverage is across your measured customer base. And I think it's so important to just get that first, because then if you're dealing with a really viable sample of customers that represent your business revenues. So that's the first place to start. And you can use your data sources to be able to achieve that. I think if we move along a step, if we think about then, just like we showed on the last slide, from the results that you get or the data that you're collecting, who is at risk in your customer base? You have to start there. And sometimes, just like we showed on that prioritization slide, they might be the slightly tougher customer or the more difficult conversation to have. But you've got to address it, otherwise that revenue is going to slip and someone else might win it if you operate within a very competitive marketplace.
Yeah, agree.
I think from step 3, right, we have to be using our data intelligently. We're having a conversation today, though, about outer loop in the B2B context. So identifying the top 3 systemic issues from those detractor themes is, again, where the plan needs to be formulated. And when we're going and having that conversation with the CFO about needing a fix pot, a budget to resolve and remedy customer issues, then we can go in with that information and say, look, we've already identified where we're getting hurt the most. And here's the top 3 things we want to share with you.
Yeah.
I think looking at step 4, we want to think about how we utilize the resources around us in the business to achieve success in these areas. I mean, if you're on this call today and you're a team of 1 or 2 or 3, it's going to be really hard tackling one priority issue, let alone the 3 to 5 that we've recommended today. So we're recommending here that you leverage your champions from across the business, your engaged stakeholders. Your first customer in CX is the colleague next to you, as I always like to say. So use your network sensibly and set deadlines per issue, time-bound ways of addressing these customer fixes. And then for step 5, we really want to show that the proof is in the pudding. So plan that first customer update, fix something, find the affected accounts, send emails, communicate clearly, and show and demonstrate evidence back within the business again. I think that's 5 really clear steps that everybody can incorporate into their CX management strategy for our team.
Yeah, I think so. And it's an agile structure as well, especially as you get to 4 and 5. This is something you don't have to do a big waterfall development on. You can keep changing on it. Of course, that means you need to keep measuring. So that's the other tip. Doing a once a year survey is probably not going to cut it. So you want to be able to figure out what's going on the whole time. And there you go. Hey, Ben, that's really good. I think you brought that home nicely. How about we take some questions?
Hope so. Yeah, let's talk. Yeah.
All right, Ian, I'm going to throw it over to you. You've been monitoring the questions in the chat. Is there something that can you help? Can you throw a question at us?
Hi, guys. Great chat here. Yes, I do have some questions. So Raj asked, love the revenue at risk metric. What would you consider to be at risk passives and detractors, question mark?
Sorry, Ian, can you repeat that again?
Yeah. So what would you consider, quote unquote, at risk? Is it passives, detractors, both? Give us a little bit more flavor on what we think are at risk accounts. Okay,
Ben, you go for that. How would you answer that
first? I mean, depending how you feel about, there's an argument to say that all customers are at risk, right? But to give you somewhere to start, A passive is just one step away from being a promoter if you follow the logic of what Net Promoter Score was always originated to try to tell you. And there are companies, of course, that are resourced in such a way that they can make lots of callbacks to close loops with customers. I think initially, focusing on detractors is obviously the most important area. You know, we showed one of our screen slides there, which showed sort of dollar revenue per detractors, passives, and promoters. If you are able to resource to recontacting passives as well to find out what's the small thing that we would need to do to improve your experience for you. It's a very different conversation to calling back a detractor. So I think it's well worth considering these bandings in their own right. There are companies that call back promoters too. And the question is different. They say, what did you love about the experience that you had with us? Because there's just as much to learn from that as there is a focus on anything negative that came out of the experience too. So if you want to start somewhere, start with detractors. If you can resource to it, call back everybody. It's all insight and it's all follow up.
I'm just going thanks for that. That's a really good answer, Ben. I'm going to add some more nuance. Again, in big B2B companies, it's not always as simple as a promoter or detractor being at risk.
Yeah.
I love that nuance you put in it. Sometimes with a detractor, you've got a very good, solid relationship. They're just highly critical of you, which is maybe the good sign of a good relationship.
Yeah.
So, much as it pains me to say this, you can't just take your net promoter system as the only signal. You've got to do more due diligence on that. Follow, exactly as you say, follow what is really behind this. But it's a really good first signal. Given anything else, you look at your basket of customers, you can learn a lot from it and then learn, oh, okay, so these customers are doing it. I hope that answers the question, Ian.
Yeah, and didn't you say earlier on, I mean, at least a detractor is letting you know how they feel. A non-respondent isn't, right? So a detractor doesn't mean they're going to walk. It just means you really need to nail that relationship and fix the problems in order to improve their future loyalty to you, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. I think Stephanie's also got a sort of a follow-up point on that. I can see in the chat, Ian, if it's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, it's definitely, if I just go back a couple of things here, this is a very easy chart to do, this one here. This is where all your revenue at risk is. It's a guide. And of course, as I said, it doesn't have non-responders in it, but it's a place to start. You know, given anything else, this is a really good way of doing it. And again, if you go a level lower, and just go back up here, you can see, you can actually assign the values, if you've got a good system, to each driver. It's not scientific in the way that, you know, it's not completely defensible, but it gives you direction to go in. And in business, you know, direction is better than nothing. So I think that's where to go on it.
Yeah. Very good.
We have another question from Michaela. So how do you guys track systematic improvements? Is that with NPS, CSAT? How do you track systematic improvements?
Ben, over to you. You love
All right.
metric.
So I'm going to think of, all right, I'll give you an example from my past, which will probably tell the story. So at Santander, where I used to work, we program and a specific market research vendor who measured customer vulnerability and what happened in the instances of bereavement for the customer base, two very highly sensitive areas of customer focus, that require a degree of specialism within the organization over and above managing day-to-day accounts, for example. So through our measurement, we put a stepped improvement of governance in place in order to track improvements in those areas that customers were feeding back to us. The business assigned a specific champion to that, a very successful business professional in our business called Emma, a team to resource to that. And over time, the market research that was coming in was used as the benchmark against those improvements. So with us, we use NPS and CSAT. It might be in your organization, however, that you want to use good project management capabilities and other things outside of CX metrics to capture the success of that. For example, interviews with colleagues. Do they understand the changes that we're trying to make and the benefits that they're really intended to achieve? Is this likely to be improving the culture that you see around you? Are your colleagues accepting more that actually customer experience becomes just a part of what they do? To give more clarity to that kind of very overriding vanilla statement, CX is everyone's job. So whilst you may see something reflected externally in customer feedback, when you're going through these stepped improvements. There's also the consideration of your colleague base internally as well. And I think these things can be captured with good project management and just some really good governance models, which you may already use through some of the techniques and methods that you have in your organization already.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to go there. Ben, you're a bit more neutral on Net Promoter than I am. I'm a big fan of Net Promoter. You're a bit more neutral about that, which is fine. I think as long as you're consistent about this, I've got to be honest though, one of my best metrics to look at is actually response rate, which is thinking about engagement. And if you've got, even if you do nothing else, you count how many customers or a percentage of them have got a particular issue. That's not a bad way. It's a simplistic way of tracking it. If you can put Net Promoter on it, it's even better. But just doing that, that's at least a place to start. And then as you drill down, you can put more evidence on it. You can go out to customers and get some more in-depth knowledge on that one.
Yeah,
just looking at the time. Let's take another question. Ian, over to you. What?
Yeah, so we have a question from Sasha Kiran. So this is an interesting one. To know which of your customers are promoters, passive detractors, we first need to bring in statistically significant feedback. So that's a bit of a dangerous thing in B2B, which I'll pass this one to Adam. He's basically asking, what's a good response rate for our relationship and transactional surveys? So let's maybe start there.
Well, I think we sort of covered that. What's a good response rate? I don't know. So that's a simple thing. Is that, but you should be covering a significant chunk of your revenue, whether it's B2B or B2C, I think. And in B2B, definitely, if you're looking at, we said, I think 80% is where you should be covering your revenue, getting feedback from that. I don't know, Ben, what do you think? You're more of a stats guy than I am.
Yeah, I'm reading the question as well. I think he says, what are the most powerful ways of bringing this up, and the references to response rate. So actually, we have a really good working model from the CustomerGauge benchmarks report a few years back, which talks about how if you're going to get feedback from a client, let's say client for a minute, actually it's in your best interests to maybe subdivide the levels: senior, middle management, frontline. Now, maybe with senior contacts, you're going to get 1 or 2 responses. With middle management, you should expect a volume more. And at frontline, you should expect significantly more, because all 3 levels of those user come into contact with your brand as a supplier to them. So I think it's really important to think about the levels of feedback that you will get. You can then split your reporting consequently. You can say our senior leaders think one thing about us, our middle management, who use us in a completely different way, think this about us, and then our frontline thinks these things about us. That gives you directional intelligence and the key drivers we talked about earlier on, which can help you focus on where the priorities are. So actually, you might find that you get a much healthier response rate if you think about where you're aiming your surveys and where you're aiming your feedback, rather than just at one or two very busy and very elusive senior stakeholders who may only be the only responses you get. And I've seen accounts tell me that, I got one person respond and they gave us a 7. That's completely unfair. When I talk to the rest of the account, they all think we're great. So is it necessarily fair to have your score represented by just that one response? No, it's probably not.
I like it. That's a good one.
I think that answered Dennis's question. So hopefully that's a good response for that. I would say let's do one more, guys, and then what we can do is we can answer these questions offline in the follow-up email with the recording. Okay. So are NPS score bands comparable across regions or cultures? That's from Raj.
Oh, that's a good one.
I've got a few on this. Ben, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so there have been reports, and you can do, so I'm a big fan of using the industry literature to inform us as to what's happening out there. And I actually think there was a really good report that just came out a little while ago from Ipsos, if I'm not wrong, that talks all about differences in culture and how that cultural impact in itself has an impact on the responses that you'll see from survey bandings. And there's all kinds of things that we see behaviorally across different regions. The short answer is yes. The geographical reason that a region does, through the research that's been done on this, appear to have an impact on whether you're likely to be a detractor, a passive, or promoter in your response bandings. And that's got a lot to do with just the history of cultural acceptance around service performance. There is a few myths around this, so you've got to be careful. But it should be something that you do consider when you're managing a global customer experience program and how you see these results coming through, especially if you're rolling all up into some sort of global number.
I think that's a really good answer. There's definitely cultural differences, and I'll give you an example in a second. But I'm going to give a contrary view here. I think it's mostly driven by differences in service and everything that I've seen. I mean, I'm also basing this on 20 million surveys. Sorry, I'm up 200 million surveys worldwide that we've been doing in my life.
Good.
So, the differences really are more in the way that people deliver a service, I think, than a cultural aspect. Because I've seen plenty of Germans giving a 10 and plenty of Americans giving a 0. So I think there's that. One scientific way of doing it is, of course, to say we're just going to say these are the results for Germany, and we cannot mix them with anybody else, for example, and and then just look for an increase of points over the board. That could be a good way to do it. I would say, to sum up, cultural aspects are minimal, except in Japan. And in Japan, I consistently see a big difference, and it's an amazing 25 to 30 points of difference. If you're at an NPS 20 in Japan, you'd actually be an NPS 50 elsewhere. And that is hard to explain. Apart from
Fujitsu, we saw the same, and we had positive numbers in some regions and minus numbers in Japan. You're absolutely right.
Ian, over to you. Is that it? We got time for one more question, or
we could do one more. So it's basically with survey fatigue and declining response rates, how do you collect customer insights on the outer loop without using surveys? It's a big one.
That's a really good question. Save the easy ones for last, right? Just read it out again, just so we got it. So it's about with survey responses on decline.
Yeah, with survey fatigue and declining survey response rates, how do you collect customer insights on the outer loop without using surveys?
Ben, can I take this one, and then I'll take it first and then
go for it.
Okay,
I've got an answer, but go ahead.
A strong opinion on this. I don't think that there is survey fatigue if you do it right. I think if you bring your customers along and you explain to them what you're doing and you're going back to them with this is what we learned, you see response going up. And I see this the whole time with our clients. Overall, the response rate that we've been working with clients, that the median has only gone up or down by less than 1% over the last few years through COVID and everything like that. You've got to go back to customers. I think that's the most amazing thing. And how do you do the outer loop stuff? You say to your customers, we take it seriously. We want your feedback to improve. And in B2B, I think that works. I don't know if that's a good answer. But surveys are one way of doing it. It doesn't hurt to pick up the phone every so often and actually ask people. But
you've just segued into what I was going to say. Sometimes we have to think about complementary methodologies. I mean, sometimes we get that survey feedback from the non-responding customer by doing exactly what you've just said. Pick up the phone. In fact, in my last company, we had champions for CX in every country. And some of them were more proactive than others. But I know the guy in France, Francois from France, he used to get on the train and go and see his customers. I know that's, we all work hybrid these days and some people like to work from home. But he used to get on the train, travel all over France, go and see his customers and talk to the ones who hadn't responded to the survey. And he'd come away armed with insights. And of course, that conversation becomes much more than just a survey. It's also a two-way communication methodology of saying, well, all that feedback you've been giving us, these are the things we've been doing. So you're actually informing them as to what you're doing with your outer loop frameworks, what it is you're actually changing in the organization. And he was able to say things like, so you should expect someone down the line, we're going to be able to do these things and those things and improve this and change that and remodel that. They're not here yet, but they're coming. And that sort of relationship management that comes with this additional customer relationship work outside of surveying is a brilliant way of communicating around this type of stuff. And then I think if you put it all into a bucket, you can transcribe that stuff, actually, your conversation notes, and punch it through your sentiment engine. We can use AI for that, right? We can model sentiment and themes around all of this stuff. So it's not lost data, it's just data in a different way.
Agree. Hey, listen, Ben, why don't we wrap it up there? I want to thank you so much for being on the call with me today, and also to thank everybody who attended. If anybody wants to do a lot more work on this, I've got to tell you, Ben is an expert on this. He is available to be engaged. He's an expert in this, and I would definitely recommend him in your business if you're looking to do advance on this.
Oh, thank you.
Any last thoughts, Ben, before we go?
No, well, I'd say I love these conversations. I think they're needed. I think it's really important that we do bring these things to the surface. They take us to a deeper level than maybe some of the other content that we see out there around CX. So thank you for having me today, Adam. I've really enjoyed it, and the audience's questions as well.
Yeah, really intelligent questions. It's really good to do that. And by the way, before we go, just want to remind you, it's a small plug for CustomerGauge. We have a new feature on CustomerGauge, which is a Gauge AI voice. This is an interview system that actually gets to some of the things. It's a sort of a advancement on just the standard Net Promoter question that can get some deeper insights on your customers without going to the sense of a telephone call. If you need to know more about that, just go for AI voice and we can set you up for free. Anyway, thank you so much. We hope to see you again for our next webinar. See you, everybody.